Well, there's almost nothing left to say. We'll probably get right to questions here. Thank you for the very wonderful, warm introduction, but thank you everyone for what you contributed tonight, all of you. It's just been absolutely wonderful to be here. Thank you, Roger, for what you've done in creating this organization. I'm going to just mention, to begin with, one of the greatest movies ever made, and of course I know you'll all agree with me, Mary Poppins. Didn't quite hear the affirmation I was looking for out there. Apparently not enough of you have raised enough children, because that's how I got to be familiar with the movie. It's a thing that the test of a good movie is if you can watch it over and over again and enjoy it every time you watch it. In fact, find something new, even though you know exactly what's going to happen, you get more out of the movie every time you watch it. There's very few movies that rise to that level. And Groundhog's Day is one of the other ones. But Mary Poppins is a perfect parable of what our struggle is today with family and work. The main character is not Mary Poppins. The main character in the movie is George Banks, the father. And at the beginning of the story, he comes home from work singing his song, "I feel a surge of deep satisfaction, much as a king astride his noble steed, when I return from daily strife to hearth and wife. How pleasant is the life I lead." And it all looks so idyllic, and his life is about to fall apart completely. And I just love how there's the verse, he marches to the door, he gets his slipper, his sherry, and his pipe, and it is King Edward's on the throne, it's the age of men, I'm the lord of my castle, and it's 6:03, and the heirs to my dominion are scrubbed and tubbed and adequately fed, and so I'll pat them on the head and send them off to bed. How lordly is the life I lead. That's his relationship with his kids. He comes home and he's been with them for 3 minutes and pats them on the head and sends them off to bed. But a crisis is about to occur because Mrs. Banks, who does absolutely nothing because she has a nanny who raises the children, she spends her life marching with the suffragists to get the women to vote, because obviously women like herself are so deeply oppressed. And the crisis is the nanny has quit because these children are unbearable. And so they decide they have to hire a new nanny. Now, my son Julian, who teaches philosophy at Chesterton Academy, he has given a wonderful talk on Mary Poppins, explaining how the character of Mary Poppins represents the Blessed Virgin Mary. And it's wonderful how he does it. You can see the talk at tomism.org. That's his website, tomism.org, to get the full Mary Poppins, Virgin Mary connection. But one quick little is that when George Banks writes out the want ad, to place an ad to get the nanny, the two kids come down, Jane and Michael, and they read what they want, and their letter is addressed to their future nanny, and it's a perfect request for what to be taken care of. And of course, Mr. Banks tears it up because it's ridiculous and throws it in the fireplace. But the pieces of the paper go up into the sky, and there's Mary Poppins sitting on a cloud and reassembles the letter and reads it, obviously answering a prayer. And then she turns up and just turns poor George Banks' life upside down. Because not only does she give the children very diverting activities, but she makes them see life and have a very exciting time of it, and also shows them what a real holiday is, because a holiday, as you know, is really a word for holy day, and it's a jolly holy day with Mary. But as they go through they're walking by St. Paul's Cathedral, and they see the old lady out there feeding the birds, and she's saying, do you want to feed the birds tuppence a bag, 2 pence for a bag of seed to feed the birds. And of course, by buying a tuppence, paying a tuppence, you're not feeding the birds, you're helping an impoverished soul there. You're giving money to the poor is what you're doing. And that's what the kids want to do. But George Banks says, no, I'll show you something much better you can do with your tuppence. Takes them to the bank. And of course, it's Mary Poppins' idea that the 2 children accompany George Banks to work with him one day, which is not really what he had in mind, bringing his kids to work with him to the bank. And when he gets there, he gives the case for what they should do with the tuppence. Because if you invest your tuppence wisely in the bank, safe and sound, soon that tuppence safely invested in the bank will compound. And you'll achieve that sense of conquest as your affluence expands in the hands of the directors who invest as propriety demands. You see, Michael, you'll be part of the railways through Africa. Exactly. Dams across the Nile, the ships, fleets of ocean greyhounds, more, tell them more, majestic self-amortizing canals, fires the imagination, plantations of ripening tea, all from tuppence, prudently, fruitfully, frugally invested in the, to be specific, in the Dawes, Tomes, Mousley, Grubbs, Fidelity, Fiduciary Bank. Now, Michael, if you deposit tuppence in a bank account, you'll see that it blooms into credit of a generous amount semi-annually. And you will achieve that sense of stature as your influence expands to the high financial strata that established credit now demands. You can purchase first and second trust deeds. Think of the foreclosures. Bonds, chattels, dividends, shares, bankruptcies, debtor sales, opportunities, all manner of private enterprise. Shipyards, the mercantile, collieries, tanneries, incorporations, amalgamations, banks. Cautiously, trustingly invest with your tuppence in the Dawes, Tomes, Mousley, Grubbs, Fidelity, Fiduciary Bank. Of course, the story ends that he doesn't want to give his tuppence to the bank. He wants to give his tuppence to the old lady feeding the birds. And the banker says, no, give me your tuppence. No, I want my tuppence to the bank. And then and someone asks, what's going on? They won't give the boy his money. And of course, there's a run on the bank. It's a disaster, a wonderful, beautiful, complete disaster. And it ends with George Banks getting fired from the bank. And then he goes home and goes and flies a kite with his children. And it ends with them flying a kite. Let's go fly a kite. And he's playing with his children. He's rediscovered love of family. His wife has given up being a suffragette, and she's going to be a mother. They don't need a nanny anymore. They've got the 2 best built-in types of individuals to raise children that God could have ever created, parents. That it could do something naturally that people pay to do artificially. And it's a wonderful tale. And I guess you should probably go home and watch Mary Poppins. So, are there any questions? Yeah, so Mr. Banks, that movie just epitomizes the whole problem with our system today. We think money should be doing our work for us. And our work is not productive, and it's not family-based. We think our money should be doing the work for us by being a long and great distance from our own community, where the money actually could work for us if it were serving our own community, because then it would be helping our neighbors. But we can help our neighbors with money by buying from our neighbors, by employing our neighbors. And that's how you keep a community strong, by keeping your dollars local. Now, GK Chesterton recognized 100 years ago the great problems with capitalism versus communism or socialism. And if I could just quickly give you the theoretical from Chesterton's point of view, that capitalism is a system based on labor, where one segment of the society works for another segment of the society, the latter paying the former a wage. Socialism is also based on labor, where everyone works for the state, and the state pays a wage. And he says there's less difference than many suppose between the ideal socialist system, in which big businesses are run by the state, and the present capitalist system in which the state is run by big businesses. Communism is that form of capitalism in which all the workers have an equal wage. Capitalism is that form of communism in which the organizing officials have a very large salary. People forget that both capitalism and communism are recent players on the stage of history. That for centuries, there was really a very long and relatively stable period in human affairs where in most normal towns and villages throughout Europe and even in the early United States, the majority of men lived lives that did not depend on the wage. They were quite free to marry and have children, and they had their own homes, and they had either a field or a craft or a shop. And they could buy and sell freely, and all of that has become sort of a relic. It's now the exception where it was once the rule. And the modern world, which has become very coarse and strained and very artificial, as Chesterton points out, it is a sign of great corruption and decay when we no longer have normal desires. For instance, the normal desire to marry, which is disappearing in the modern world. The normal desire to own property, disappearing in the modern world. The normal desire for life itself, to defend and love life itself, disappearing. Chesterton said all that 100 years ago. And he says in the modern world, the common man normally has to sell, only thing he has to sell is himself, his own arms and legs. He's forced to become a laborer because he doesn't have any productive property, he doesn't have any independence. Chesterton says the opposite of employment is not unemployment, it's independence. And it's independence so that basically a capitalist society is based on the idea of individual interests. A communist society is based on community interests. The third way, the one proposed by GK Chesterton and his colleague Hilaire Belloc, is based on the family. It recognizes that the family is the basic unit of society, not the individual and not the community. That the individual should serve the family, the community should serve the family. That's the idea of subsidiarity. The family should be the primary concern of any strong society. Strong families make for a strong culture. If you emphasize individual interests, they will undermine the family. If you emphasize community interests, they will undermine the family. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the family being undermined by those other two competing interests. And what Chesterton called this third way is the very cumbersome and misunderstood term distributism. What do you say? It says distributism. No, we have, Bob. See, you haven't been paying attention. We have renamed it. By the way, the word was distributism. But, and everyone's right immediately thinks, well, that's socialism. That's taking property, redistributing it, taking from the rich and giving it to the poor. Which is sort of what Robin Hood did, and he's considered a good guy. But we're not going to go into that, because that's not what it is. It's based on Catholic social teaching as articulated in the first great encyclical on Catholic social teaching by Pope Leo XIII, Rerum Novarum, on the working classes, published in 1891. And there, the Pope recognized that industrial capitalism had created a system that he said was little different from slavery. And he recognized that the wrong solution to it was exactly what everyone in his generation was falling for. The wrong solution was socialism. He proposed a solution where workers become owners, because ownership is what gives freedom and independence and self-sufficiency. And that was just a few years later when Chesterton and Belloc started reading that encyclical. They wanted to promote that idea. They came up with the word distributism, which was Belloc's idea, because there's a phrase in the encyclical where the Pope says distributive justice. In other words, everyone's entitled to justice. There's no argument there. Justice is for all. But they all agreed it was a bad term. And they said, well, we'll come up with a better one. But they didn't. But we did, Bob. We've got a new term. See, Bob used to be on the board of directors for the Chesterton Society. And actually, he was one of the people who was put in charge of coming up with a better term. And he, not only is he no longer on the board, he didn't do it. He didn't come up with a better term. But we, let's hear it for Bob. There you go. We came up with one. In fact, I have a back issue of Gilbert over there. Could you hold up the magazine that's on the end of the table over there, on the far end of the table? Hold that one up. There it is. That's a great Grant Wood painting up there on that cover. He's a great regionalist painter. Localism. Localism is our new name. That's something everybody can understand instantly. That's what you're doing here with the Guild. The idea is to hire local companies to do your work. Give your money to local companies. Keep your dollars local. Don't buy from the chain store. Buy from the local independent shop. Don't buy your books from a river in South America. In fact, don't buy anything from a river in South America. It's not going to help you. What? Well, yes, it's convenient. I'm glad you used that term, convenience. Because as GK Chesterton says, an inconvenience is only an adventure. Wrongly considered, whereas an adventure is an inconvenience rightly considered. If you give up your convenience, your life will be more interesting instantly. You will have a greater adventure every day by choosing the less convenient solution. If you have a choice of two actions, this is something my father taught me, God rest his soul, good, faithful Baptist man. If you have two courses of action, he said, always choose the more difficult one, because you will gain much more from that. And that's what we're about, localism. I mean, there are certain things, wine, that should be possibly imported, okay? But you don't have to import butter. You don't have to buy butter from Ireland, even though it's really good. And you could buy cheese from Wisconsin, that's close enough to be local. You can make so many different decisions and keep your dollars local and help your neighbor. Love your neighbor. Spend your money. It's a moral decision the way you spend your money and who you hired to do your job for you. And I was really pleased when I heard these people come up here tonight. And the network did great. I'm going to be talking to some of you who presented yourself here today. I've got some ideas for you, and I am so pleased you guys are implementing exactly what Chesterton was promoting. I had the great privilege of doing something local when I started a high school. There was an immediate need for that, and I wasn't going to wait around for someone else to solve the problem when I could solve it myself. And the result has been absolutely magnificent, beyond my wildest dreams. And the fact that these other people around the country are also starting their own schools. And people say, well, Dale, you're starting a franchise. Yeah, that's why I'm so filthy rich. Yeah, that's why people are always coming and interviewing me and saying, Dale, what do you do with all that money you have? Now, our franchise is a model that people implement where they are. They do the work of starting a school. All we've done is given them exactly a model to follow, that if they follow it, it will work. And then they're part of a network, and we're all supporting each other. Just like this network here is supporting each other. Catholics have to start working together. And when we create a network, we're also creating a net, everybody. And what do you do with a net? You catch fish. You can't, and our fish are men. We become fishers of men with the net. And we start showing people from the ground up how we can change the world. There are no top-down solutions. And that's why we're so frustrated in every election, and we're so frustrated with some other big corporation to something just absolutely heathen. Because we're waiting for them to solve our problems for us. It's all within our own hands. It's this grassroots movement. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be fighting side by side with you and be a fellow foot soldier with you. Because this is how we're going to recreate a Catholic culture. Yeah. So, before I take some questions, I'll just give you a few good Chesterton quotes here. Because why give a talk without quoting Chesterton? There's absolutely no reason. The disintegration of rational society started in the drift from the hearth and the family. The solution must be a drift back. I have a new book that just came out called The Story of the Family, and there's an important chapter in there about home and work. Everything we've talked about tonight is really in that chapter. There's another book over there called The Hound of Distributism, Before We Change the Name, a pre-name change book. And that one will explain distributism very well. And then I have a book called The Complete Thinker, and there's a great chapter in there called Buying and Selling, which explains, again, what we've talked about tonight. Chesterton says, if we're really a true conservative, well, we hold that the old creed and culture of Christendom, we hold that the old creed and culture of Christendom realize for men, relatively to all that is reasonable and possible, the great art of life, which we call liberty. The truth has made us free. The tradition has given to men the sort of liberty they really like. Local customs, individual craftsmanship, variety and self-expression, the presence of personality in production, the dignity of human will. These are expressed in 1,000 things, from hospitality to adventure, from parents instructing their own children to children inventing their own games, from the village commune to the vin du pays, which means the wine of the country, which is imported. From practical jokes to pilgrimages, from patron saints to public house signs. The mark of all these things is variety and spontaneity, the direct action of the individual soul on the material environment of mankind. The result is a rich complexity of common things, a wealth of work and worship, a treasure which we refuse to abandon and are resolute to defend. I believe in making thousands of things, making jokes, making pictures, making as opposed to faking goods, making books, even articles, of which the reader will sadly perceive there is no end. Making toys, making tools, making farms, making homes, making churches, making sacred images, and incidentally also making war on people who would prevent me from doing these things. God bless you.